Hi guys, welcome back to another feature of my vlog. I've been having a really good time having these conversations, as I want to call them now, with different people. And during these conversations, whether it be people who are outside of corporate life or inside of corporate life, one thing is certain, there is no right answer. There is not, you have to get the answer perfectly right in order to find your path. We all have separate journeys, but we can all still learn from one another. And that is one thing that I've been really enjoying while having these conversations. Today is no different. I'm actually very excited about this conversation I'm going to have today because I'm actually talking to a former boss of mine who is also a mentor of mine as well. I used to work with her. She was not my last boss, but she was one of the last bosses that I had. And she's one person I've always stayed in contact with because she's very positive, she's very inspiring, and I'm very excited to introduce her to you today. So welcome, Marcia Parker Robinson. How are you doing? Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Kimon. I'm doing fine. It's so great to see you as well. It's actually
so good to see you. Yeah. And as people can hear from the accent, you're not Trini, and it's like, where does the accent come from? You're kind of like a Brit-Macon, right?
It's a bit of a mix, right?
Yeah, a bit of a mix.
I'm born and grew up in the UK for a period of my time, and then I came back to Jamaica with my, at a younger stage. And so now I have this mix of an accent that if I go back to the UK, they ask me if I'm Australian. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Where did you get that from? And then when I'm over here, yeah, it's a Caribbean UK mix, I call it. Yeah.
So I want to kind of explore that a little bit, right? Because a lot of people who can't seem to fathom at all somebody leaving a first world country and coming back to a developing nation, as we call the Caribbean, right? Because I got out a lot. I lived in the US for 9 years, and then I moved back. I wasn't born in the US, I was born in Trinidad, and I'm sure it's very different for you being born in the UK, growing up in the UK, and deciding, in a conscious decision as an adult, I assume, to move back to Jamaica.
Okay, so let me tell you, what happened was I didn't move back as an adult. I moved back when my parents came back. It was like this, but I did go back to England and came back to Jamaica. So you're right. As an adult, I came back to Jamaica of my own free will.
Yeah.
When I first came, it was a huge culture shock, yeah? And then, of course, you get adapted. There is definitely things about the Caribbean that most people wouldn't see it as a positive, but just something simple like you can go to the supermarket and you can see oranges. You had no clue that oranges grew on trees that look like, you can go out and pick an orange and you can pick you can do so many different things in the Caribbean, and yet you're sort of like disconnected when you're in the first world country. Okay, so there's positive things. I will always love my, Britain. I'll always love the UK, but I always love my Jamaica, my Caribbean, right? And then later on, when I did go back to the UK, I had gotten married, I had kids. And the one thing I wanted for them, there were a couple of things. I said, number one, I wanted them to be in a country where it doesn't matter what profession or levels, it's occupied by people that look like them, yeah? Black people. Whether you're a judge or a lawyer or a teacher or a farmer, or any profession or anything you want, you can see that there's no glass ceiling for them. Number two, I wanted that village feel of growth. I mean, at the end of the day, my parents were my parents, but my gosh, yeah. Your grandparents, your auntie, your neighbor down the road who you call auntie and uncle, everybody was looking out for you, right? That is a complete different contrast than the UK. You're pretty much on your own. And I wanted them to have that. And also, contrary to belief, our primary school levels, our schooling, I don't know if you found that, Kimon, but it sets you up for a higher standard. Yeah. We have more limited resources, and therefore we have to work hard to use those resources. It's not taken for granted. Whereas you tend to find, I found in the UK that kids growing up don't understand what that understand limited resources and just feel to take it for granted. And I didn't want them to have that. And I felt that they had a good foundation. And there was one other thing before I come off that topic, is that when I was here, I learned my history. I understood my history, right? And it made me more anchored when I went back. And then you see, you take it for granted that everybody knows their history, but they're not taught that. They're taught the kings and queens of England and Queen Elizabeth I and what have you. And the only thing you probably touch on is maybe the Commonwealth if you're in school. You certainly don't touch on our history, the Arawakas, the Caribs, the slavery, our history, even in broader sense in Latin America, that lot. They don't touch any of that. So you don't have the same kind of roots. And I found that to anchor me a lot.
That is extremely significant because I don't think people who have not lived in a country where you are literally minority. And it's so funny about words, you know, like I was telling somebody some years ago, like we could make a word could mean one thing and we could put so much meaning behind that word. So minority really means less than in number, but yes, in those countries becomes less than in education, less than in socio-economic, less than in, you know, like, so, you know, you put so much context around that word and, you know, it's almost kind of like a slur, like it's offensive to say minority almost, but you know, it's even if it's
that's what you are. I mean, I think it's just really funny for me is that people seem to perceive to know what it is to live under those circumstances. But jumping on a plane and visiting or doing a course or just shopping or going to a seminar is a complete different thing than living there day to day.
I want to get into this whole corporate life thing, right? So, you know, as I mentioned, you were my former boss. And it's so interesting because I don't usually ever have a strong opinion about bosses. Usually for me, it's like, okay, well, I come in and do my job. They sign the paperwork with regards to me, whatever it is they have to sign. And we usually have no issues. It's like, you know, you're just there, I'm here, I'm doing my thing, and leave me alone. It just so happens that the last 3 bosses I had, and incidentally, was all from the same organization that I had the strongest opinions of. And out of the 3 of them, you were the only one I actually liked. And it wasn't just me, it was the entire team because you're still in contact with the entire team. We're on a group chat.
Yeah, I am still in touch with everybody. I'm honored that we're all together still as friends.
Yeah, and it wasn't that, you know, it wasn't that you were like an easy boss or somebody who let us get away with anything. You held us to account. But I think the difference with you, and I speaking for myself, is that, you know, I felt that respect from you. I didn't feel like you tried to make us know that, listen, I am the boss, so my ideas are always superior to yours. Because, you know, there are some people who just want to make you look less than they are. So they do everything to show you that I'm always up and you're down, and you didn't do that. And I really appreciated that about you.
Oh, well, thanks, Kimo. I probably have a different management style than some. I don't know if it had a lot to do with the mix in my background or values, but I always believe that, I'll be honest, I prefer to hire strong people, yeah? Strong people doesn't mean that you're necessarily hugely vocal. It just means that, you know, it's not a walkover. Because I respect intelligence, I can't always be right. There's no way. I don't have this God complex. You're right. I may have to take responsibility for a lot of the direction that we need to go to, accountability for the things that we are supposed to deliver as a team. But can you imagine me having to get up every day and work out the right way to do something? I always appreciated good feedback. And the only thing I always asked for was that everybody would respect what anybody else was saying on calls or conference calls or meetings, that nothing is stupid, nothing is silly, we're not going to insult each other. But I appreciated the feedback, I always have. I think it makes a team stronger, it makes individuals stronger. And my job as well was to make sure that I tried to develop everybody I had to be as strong and actually better than how they came in, whether it's technical skills, whether it's communication skills, whether it's confidence that they may need to have, but whatever it is, yeah, you know the strengths and you try to build on the weaknesses. And
I got the impression from one of my last bosses, I mean, it's nothing that he ever said, but you get a vibe from somebody, right? I got the impression because he had 3 direct managers, I was one of them, and we were all women, and we were all strong women. I got the impression that he had an issue with that, like he did not know how to relate to strong women. And whenever we said something that was contrary to what he was saying, not because we wanted to be argumentative, but because we were just giving him a different, like, look at it from this perspective, he really got defensive, and he would just kind of lash out in a kind of way. So it was always like, okay, well, we're not trying to fight you. We're on your side. We're just trying to show you a different way to look at it. I got the impression he really had an issue with dealing with strong women. How would you recommend that? Well, you're not a man, you're a woman, but as a woman, you have challenges as well, right? Like you have challenges because sometimes you have men report to you who are kind of like, listen, I'm a man, you're a woman. No, I know better than you. How do you deal with something like that?
Well, the thing about it is that, yes, you hit that all the time, right? Socialization is a hell of a thing, eh? And for some people, they feel that it's not an endangerment of their job, it's an endangerment of their entire being to be challenged. And so, therefore, it becomes more personal than it should be, yeah? I think if you recognize it, all right, you can find ways to message without losing yourself. And I mean, that doesn't mean I step back, because the truth of the matter is sometimes when you do have persons who are like that, they would like to dominate, right? That ain't gonna work. That has a connotation beyond just the word for me. I'm a woman, eh? Domination in any form or fashion is quite offensive to me, because I am a woman, and being dominated by a man will put up barriers for any woman, actually. But sometimes what I found is, if you know and you spend the time to watch how they react to certain things, there's ways to communicate a message to them that they don't feel like it's a direct attack on them, so to speak. I can't really give an example, kind of quote me here, but like how you could go in there and says, I don't agree with that position. I think that we should do X, Y, and Z. And maybe I would say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Okay, I hear you. Have we ever considered though, or have you considered maybe that we could do it this way? It would dovetail a bit more into what you want, but with a variation to it. Find something that they're also saying to dovetail into the opinion, because they're not completely always wrong. They're not 100% wrong. But if you bring in something that they have, and then put in something that you think would work with what they have, they actually can feel like they can own that. They can usually cannot own that. It really takes.
You kind of do it in such a way that you validate what they're saying. You kind of bring them around to your direction.
Yeah, because basically nobody gets up and says 100% wrong. Okay, rarely. So there are going to be some truths in what they're going to say. I want to do it this way. Why? Because of X, Y, and Z. And so there is always going to be some truths, but what your position is not necessarily what they have. But what you would say sometimes is, I understand that. Okay, what if we take someone, like that point there about X, Y, and Z is very valid, but have we considered maybe we could do C, D, and E to make that more stronger, make it more likely to happen? And therefore, it feels more of something where, as you said, validating and working with rather than indirect, direct. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. In fact, it can direct positions are really good if you're, listen, if you're in total 100%, I don't think this is going to work. Then, and you back it up with reasons as to why, and the person still doesn't want to accept it, then there's not much you can do about that, right? Because sometimes there leaves a situation where you really need to go on the record. Because if you really believe in something, you can write it and you can speak to it, yeah? Because in the end, in the long run, you want that on record. But 9 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, the situation is, it doesn't have to be that black and white. It doesn't have to be that confrontational. You can't really do anything about somebody who is totally, utterly, completely, though, ill-equipped to be able to take any kind of challenges. So
I think what you said is a perfect point, because I've always kind of struggled with how to broach something to somebody. Like, I'm much better at writing than saying it to them, because sometimes I'm just like, what are you talking? But, you know, as you said, you know, you kind of ease into it. Socializing yourself is actually very important. And honestly, it kind of helps you progress if you want to climb the corporate ladder, being able to socialize. Like, I remember my sister saying that she was listening to some guys talk, and they didn't give somebody who was very qualified for a job the job because one guy said, well, I wouldn't have a beer with him. So it was kind of like, well, okay, if you can have a beer with him, then, you know, which is ridiculous. I mean, what does it have to say about if we can do the job? But socialization is important.
Yeah, I mean, like, the culture of a company is different, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, a culture of a company like, say, a Google, yeah, more informal. They're gonna wear casual clothes. They're going to be more casual. Maybe they work in an environment outside of the office that does need to have a beer. Okay, yeah. Rarely do you find that. And barbecues, because you're still working, you're throwing ideas out, etc., and stuff like that. Those are not the norm. I've always said that I don't necessarily pick people because I want them to be invited to dinner. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want them, though, to be able to fit and work within a team. And that is really important. But how they work with a team is not going to be equal to the next person who works in the team. Yeah, there's no equality of that. If you found that, then we're just zombies, robots. Yeah. But yeah, I understand, especially from a male, because in a male environment, maybe, like I said, they reinforce drinking a beer and they're actually brainstorming and working out how to do something, and maybe that person just wouldn't do it. But I don't agree with it, because I have this concept that I know we're going to go talk in corporate, but I have this concept that sometimes corporations and organizations don't find a way to hold their talent because of the way they're structured. That if you move in management, you must have people who necessarily have to report to you. It could be that this person doesn't have people skills, but they're extremely bright in other factors, right? And therefore, maybe what you need to do is have that person elevated via the scope of what they're carrying out and what they're doing, rather than the numbers of persons who are answering to them. Right.
So that's an excellent point. Yeah, because sometimes you're an SME, you're like a specialist in a field, and they need to keep you. And you know.
Yeah, they need to keep you. Yeah.
I just want to give some context behind your experience, because just so people understand that you have been in upper management, like senior levels of management. It's not just, you weren't just like a regular supervisor. You've been in positions. You've spoken to CEOs. You've spoken to people who have significant take in the company, and you've also had to deal people from different companies just by the positions that you have had, and in being in those big positions, being a woman, being a Black woman, because you have worked for multinational operations, so you've dealt with people from different walks of life, right?
Yeah.
How have you been able to navigate that being a woman, being a Black woman, being a Caribbean woman from a small country? You know, like, how have you been able to navigate
that? Interesting. I think, like I said, I started, I mean, in my fields in the UK, and then moved into management in the UK. So I've had teams that are, as you said, I'm Black, I'm a woman. Whew, you can't get into too many different minorities there, right?
Yeah.
And I've had diverse persons working with me, whether it be by color, race, creed, or religion. Okay. And so you learn to, your communication skills are extremely important. Yeah. Don't start off with this position of power. Your position is just a position. You do carry power with it, but at the end of the day, if you don't do well, what's the use of all the power, right? Yeah. And you're only as good as your team, and you're only as good as the people you work with. And you also have to have an understanding of other people's needs. We get very siloed very quickly. And so therefore you don't understand, you know what, we know what we need, right? We have certain targets. We need what we need. But if your needs don't align with somebody else's needs or some other department's needs, then in a silo, what's the use? Eh? You could negotiate a price that is absolutely brilliant, but the product you've negotiated for is absolutely useless because no one can use it, right? Yeah. So I think by the nature of, well, we'll go in it. I do procurement, right? And supply chain and stuff. You're in a unique position because you interface with almost every department there is. Everybody's going to want goods or services, all right? You also have a fundamental bottom line impact. If the goods don't get there, the services don't get there, we don't get that, it doesn't go to the customer. But then we can't do it at any cost, otherwise if it gets to the customer, we're still in negative. So that is unique. How do I navigate with them? All right. There's one thing I can definitely say for sure for me. I don't want to just know the heads of departments. Yeah. Heads of departments I need to know and I respect for the positions they hold, but they also have teams. That's where the knowledge base is for me some of the times. Eh? And so I need to know what the teams need. I need to know what they need. And I also need to know what the manager really wants out of all of it as well. So I've always tried to communicate at all levels and try to understand what it is that people want. And it always feeds up. It usually always does. And your skill sets doesn't change whether you're talking to a member of staff at a certain level, or whether you're talking to the CEO. The communication style remains the same. Yeah, you have to know how, of course, at a different level, how to present. Somebody had already given me this thing that if you present, you know more than anybody else in the room. That's what you do. You do homework. You do homework a lot. Don't think that you can go in the room and BS your way through. That's just not happening.
Some people have tried.
Doesn't work in the long run, right?
It works for so long. After a while, it's like, okay, no, we know what you're doing.
No, you got to do your take it. Janitorial services. You turn around and you ask everybody, all right, customers, what are doing? You talk to the supervisor. You know who gives me the most information? The person who's cleaning my office.
Yeah.
Person cleaning
and that's true. You know, people look past those people, but those are the people who are doing it every day. And those are the people who you need to get the information from, because that's who's been impacted. So you have to know, you know.
Yeah, and you can't be highfalutin when you're doing it. You're talking to a person, a human being that has to go and do this service, take the money, and live a life. Everybody are human beings and adults, and need to be treated that way.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to go into specifically was the idea of toxic work culture. So I know, like, we've all heard people say, you know, it's a toxic work culture, and in some ways you kind of accept it, but you know, you're gonna have situations that might be toxic. But as we were saying, that, you know, there are things that are personal to different people, right? So not everything will be like the straw that breaks the camel's back for everybody. But I want to kind of discuss how do you know when toxic is too toxic, and now you have to start looking at your situation differently?
All right, so everybody's level for different aspects of toxic is different. Yeah. Some people will thrive in it, in the sense that power is power, and if they feel that they can use power and inflict, you know, fear to get what they want, then they do very well in it. I mean, like, even
the source of toxicity, maybe that's probably why.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, even within slavery, what did we have? Overseers, house slaves, field slaves. People occupied positions in that structure and were, I want to be in this power rather than being downtrodden, or I just love what I'm doing compared to what I could be doing. So people's levels of toxic can be very different. I find that, number one, if something's making you extremely uncomfortable, okay? And it doesn't have to be, it can be different things. It can be, okay, you're in a situation that is within the group you're working in, right? Boss wants you to take all the credit. That's one. That's not as toxic as you would believe. Two, it could easily be you feel uncomfortable about certain innuendos that happen to you, or are being said to you, and basically makes you uncomfortable. Everybody goes in there with principles and integrity or honesty or anything, and that's why I say toxicity is people adapt to different situations depending on how comfortable they are with that situation. Right? So, for instance, I worked in bauxite, and 80% of all persons on the plant were men. Yeah, and because of what I do, I mostly were, I would say 95% of them were men. Okay, and they talk all sorts of crap around you. All right. And for some of the women, it might have been absolutely, like, if you were really uptight and took offense to it, you might not want to work in that environment. For me, it was okay to a point. As long as they respected me and we know what line we're not crossing, we're good. All right. However, you always know as a woman when it's crossing a line. You always know when the innuendos are wrong, right? And you know what is implied by certain statements. Yeah. And I think that when you do feel that, it's going to be a mental stress on you. Okay. So you could have a situation where someone has said something, you're not quite sure, even say it's work related, and you're feeling comfortable with it. It could be that the way they said it was incorrect compared to what they meant. So there's times when I've gone back and I've said, let me just get this right. You know, is it A, B, C? Is this what you want me to do? Is this what you're asking for? And in some cases, sometimes it's, oh, no. That's not what I meant. I meant X, Y, Z.
So you rephrase it. You rephrase it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Rephrase it. Yeah. Let them think about what they're saying and make them understand that you understand it completely different from what they, you know, you may even have understood it the way they did, but by restating it, it makes it very explicit that you're saying, are you sure?
Yeah. So even if they didn't mean like that, they might say, okay, maybe I should not do this because. Yeah, I get that's a very smart way to do it, actually.
Yeah. Let them restate it. Cool. So that's one. Backpedal a bit and say, no.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if it's via email. They were gonna backpedal.
Yeah, you know, I think emails are a wonderful thing as well. But as per our discussion, right? A, B, C, D, E. Right now, if it's out there and you're not going to push back and say, oh no, I meant that, then it's hanging there, and you have evidence that you asked for. This is what you understood, and they agreed with it because they didn't reply to it. But yeah, usually I'll start first with verbal and say, I just want to make sure I understand what you're,
And I remember just to cut in there, like I remember before I left, you know, I remember calling you. You had to talk me down from crazy because I got my my last boss. He had a way about him that he would like be, what you call it, like a keyboard warrior, internet bug. He wouldn't say certain things to your face, but like on email he would be vicious. And I remember the email I got, and he used a particular word, and I was livid. Like I had to sit down and really just sit down and just I had to think about this. I literally,
listen, your first answer is never the right answer either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, I'm not even going to reply. I almost took up the paper and wrote out the resignation right then and there. I said, you know what, let me not do that. Let me not do that. So let me call Marcy and see what she thinks. So I called you. And you kind of like, you brought me back down. You're like, come on. No. Yeah, like don't send the first email.
Conversation where you let loose.
Let him push you something that you're not ready to do yet.
No, and it's true. You had plans, and you shouldn't let anybody deter you away from your plans. And that is exactly what would have happened. Don't make anybody deter you from your plans. If your plans are already in motion, then basically that's what we talked about. But the other part about it is that we're human beings. We're gonna have emotions, right? And I've always found that my first written statement, so to put, I usually have to file 13. If you have somebody that you trust that can read over your shoulder and say, no, that's not the good answer at all, yeah? Because you had sent me a draft, I think, of what you were going to send, and it wasn't going to work, yeah? You needed to do it, And that's another thing, you talk about corporate life. I had a barrister teach me in one of my courses, and that was very interesting because he was a working barrister. I love that. He taught me, number one, that you always know your arguments inside out. Yeah. But that's not the argument you need to know. You need to know the one that is coming at you, the one that is going to find all the weaknesses in what you're about to say, and you bring it up instead, and you answer it instead. Yeah.
Like a debate, like you approach everything like a debate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're going to do a presentation, and you are going to give the sunny side up of everything. It's going to be beautiful, wonderful, yeah? Rubbish. There's always risks. There's always threats. There's always things that could go wrong. But you're 80% that is going to be right. Rather than have somebody bring it up and you argue it, bring it up yourself. And also counter-argue why you think it still will work. And the same thing goes for your written communication. If you're going to write something and you have a position that you want to write, don't wait until somebody else says, but no, don't even start, because you may have the answer already, but why start the argument? And most people will start that discussion with a number of people now added to the email, right? Or such.
Oh my gosh.
Just take it, diffuse it before it gets to that point, by giving why there may be some concerns, and here's your counterpoint to it. So that was always number one. And he said also, when you write, don't make it personal. Don't use we, they, have, we, they, you, all of those kind of personal nouns and pronouns. Don't use those, right? Don't make it personal. Almost like a legal document that you're writing, yeah? So if you're doing it, you don't say, I believe, no. You just say, this situation is such and such and such and such, and get rid of the I's. And we are, yeah? So those things are, those were two important things that I took away from him. And I think it holds me in great stead. Yeah, because you really do need to know what the other side of the argument is. And that's why I said do your homework. Mm. It's not good enough for you to know one side of the argument. You need to know the other side. And you can't know the other side if you don't do your homework.
And then, and in terms of situations, like, because sometimes you have different things coming at you, right? Different people have their ideas of how they want things to go. So you might have an idea for your team, and you guys have agreed upon an idea of how to approach a situation. And then the higher ups might come to you and say, no, I want you all to do it like this. and you feel that tug of war between your team, what's best for your team, and what higher ups want, which is not always, it doesn't always align. And that might create a toxic environment because the team starts to feel the pressure because they know that what is being asked of them is something that they can't really, the way that they want it approached. I know it sounds very difficult to understand, but sometimes it doesn't align from what the high ups want to what the team, what's best for your team.
I agree. It's always a negotiation sometimes, but here's what I've always believed in. Okay, management is always going to have top management working all the way down, have ideas about how things are, or they want certain things. Mostly it comes to you as targets and stuff like that, right? If you're strategic minded enough, you will probably get a pretty good idea of what is going to come down the pipeline before it comes down. Yeah. And usually you have to negotiate with the management as to what is realistic and what you can do and what you can't do. Usually 90% of your argument, if you have a proper argument, can work. Yeah. And then that you always have that 5% that is non-negotiable. If you're working with your team from a strategic point of view, and you're honest with your team from a strategic point of view, there are things that maybe you can't share with the team naturally because it's confidential at a higher level. However, you can be pretty straight and honest with your team as to what you anticipate may be coming down the pipeline or has come down the pipeline, all right? But you also have to involve your team in how we're going to get it done.
And
right?
I think one thing that's really important is that you have to be an advocate for your team because it's your team. And I've had that situation where the manager was so, he was so like, he had his own aspirations and he wanted to impress the high up so much. His team really was like, okay, well, whatever they said, we're just gonna do because I have to look good. So it was always kind of like, there was no fight. There was no, let me stand up for my team. I know what my team is doing. I have confidence in my team. If the high up said your team sucks, he would just be like, okay, yeah, they suck. There was no fight for the team. And that that makes it really hard on the team because then the team is like, they get completely demotivated.
Well, you know what? When you worked with me and we had a team that crossed the entire Caribbean, yeah, we covered 21 countries actually. And there were expectations, targets that were discussed and argued before I even knew, but we gave a heads up. We knew what was, I tried to be as honest as you can. Look, the best way to impress anybody higher up, if that is really what you're up to, personally speaking, I just want us to be able to be successful in what it is that we're trying to do, right? And if you want that success comes from being a team. Yeah, if that was possible for me to do it by myself, then I would be doing it by myself.
Yeah, you want to team. All right, yeah.
What am I going to do? Cover 21 countries all by myself sitting down? And besides, I'm not such a reservoir of absolute knowledge that I'm going to be right all the time. It can't possibly happen. I'm a human being, right? My team is a human being. So for me, it was just a personal way of doing things. Yeah, I will take flack for my team, but I will cuss you back afterwards. Yeah. Right? How do we not make this happen again? Okay.
Yeah, and I can attest to that.
How does this not happen again, and how do we recover from the situation? After you've done your do your work, you build a reputation that people will, if there is an issue, they'll come, right? I always wanted persons to go back to my team. I had no problem. If they're going to complain up, and I'm going to respond all the way up, coming down and saying, oh yeah, you have a problem with Kimon, and they come to me and they say, oh, leave it, whatever. No, then they're gonna always feel they can pass Kimon to come to me, right? And Kimon is their main person. You were senior folk, right? You weren't junior, and even if you're junior, you're still all responsible for your function, right? Now, if there is a significant problem, then they're going to feel quite comfortable copying you, writing to me. That's when you know that the customer has a problem, real problem, right?
I'll touch on one thing that you had mentioned. You mentioned empowering, more or less empowering your employees to stand up and lead the charge when needed to lead the charge. And you know, there are a lot of managers who have managers reporting to them who are dealing with projects who kind of, you know, they don't see that balance of when to delegate, of when to let your employees take charge in certain things. Like they feel they always have to be involved in every single thing. And that kind of lead to a lot of you know, resentment, and that kind of plays into the whole toxic work environment thing. So what you were saying, like if someone has a problem with, you know, your employee and there's involved in a project, let them deal with it first before you jump in.
Yeah, I mean, like, the word empowerment isn't just a word, right? You have to practice it. If you're going to hold people accountable, you're going to have to hold them accountable, full stop. You can't be holding them accountable and at the same time you're so heavily involved they don't have any accountability at all. Now that don't make any sense to me. So maybe they're doing their thing and they need a little help. Usually if you have good communication with your team, they're already going to know they're going to need help, or they can see they're going to need help. And the other thing is that usually I stayed in, I mean, like in this job and every job I've ever had where I've had teams, I stay in good communication with my teams, so that I can understand if I can see something down the road that they may not have seen. And if they come back and they, you know, give an opinion, I think we could do it this way instead of that way. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know, that's a good idea. And let's try it. But if I've said it's a good idea, I'm not going to just leave you in the battle waters if it doesn't turn out to be a good idea. Well, that's really ridiculous for me anyway. Right. It comes back down to integrity. It comes back to the honesty at the end of the day. And you know me, I'm not soft in that sense. Never, yeah, no. If you're accountable and I'm holding you accountable for what you're doing, then I'm expecting you to deliver. If, however, I keep on working with somebody and they're just not up to scratch, then you do what you need to do, which means you have to separate. I can't work with somebody that I'm holding their hands 24/7 all the time. I hold your hands at the beginning, in the middle, all the way I will be there. But if I'm doing it all the time and it's like I'm doing your job, then no.
Makes no sense, yeah. What advice would you give somebody who is coming into a big role? They now, you know, they finally got this big position, they have a team under them and they're so excited, they're ready to run with it, but they have all these challenges, right? All these things that they have to, you know, overcome and stuff in order to have a great team. What would you say to this person about to run off with a big team?
If you're running off with a big team, all right, first you're being promoted in the big team. That doesn't mean, that's like when you get your driver's license, you stop driving with the learners, and all it meant is now you don't have somebody sitting beside you. Doesn't make you a competent driver. It just means that you've passed the stage to now learn how to drive on the road by yourself, okay? So that's the first mindset you need. Second, I would say is, if there's other people along the way that you can get advice from, get advice as well. Take it from a knowledge base. I do a lot of reading. You know what works for you, and it opens new ideas. But more importantly, try to get know your team first. Yeah, try to really get to know not just their technical skills, but their other skills, their human skills. Yeah. And it's great to be fantastic if they've got all the strengths, but you need to understand their weaknesses as well. I've always thought to myself that if people have a level of competence, technical skill is something pretty much I can teach them. Yeah. However, what I can't teach to somebody is strength of character, their communication. I keep going back to that, but it's so important. Communication skills, their honesty, their integrity. Those are the things I can't teach. I can't teach strength I can't teach any of those. Those come with that. And you're going to have them at different levels. Strength doesn't mean you're a bull in a china shop. Some of the people I've known to be the strongest people I know are some of the quietest people I know in my life. And so therefore you have a huge respect for that. And talking their mind, whether they're quiet or not, is extremely important. So yeah, you got your team, get to know your team, get to know their competencies, listen carefully. When you turn team leaders, you have this need to want to talk. Guilty as charged sometimes. You have new ideas, new directions, you have targets, you have everything. Stop, pause, listen. Yeah, it's extremely important. And read. I have been directed to some very good books in my time. Great articles. Know about your world as well. You're not in a silo. Find out what's going on, what kind of volatilities that are in the market, what is emerging, like out of COVID-19, working from home, new challenge, team that is working from home now, instead of you physically seeing it. If that is a part of your need, that you need to see and touch your team, you just stepped off into quicksand. Yeah, so that is why the ability to communicate and to know how to manage is not restricted to physical presence. And that goes not just for your team, but for the clients that you're trying to deliver that product to. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I have to say, Marcia, we're getting well short on time, so I want to wrap up. But before we do,
okay.
I just want to touch back on some of the things that you said so we have it fresh in our minds, right? Because you gave a lot of great feedback, I have to say. You talked about socialization, understanding how to socialize within your environment. It's very important, and it also kind of leads to networking as well if you want to climb the corporate ladder. You did also speak about knowing you spoke about more than once, knowing your team, and not only knowing your team, but knowing teams that you have to work with as well. Not just the management, you have to know all the employees, you have to know all the stakeholders. If you're doing something for janitorial services, talk to the janitor because it's directly impacting them. Make sure you show respect to everyone you speak to. Don't, lord your title over anybody. Just have a human-to-human interaction and conversation, and it goes so much more farther if you just show people that level of respect. In terms of toxic work cultures, because sometimes it's just hard to see the balance with that. Important thing is to rephrase what is being asked of you, state it and rephrase it in your own words. So if they have to backpedal, they will backpedal.
It can be genuine miscommunication.
It can be just, yeah. And also, you're also doing it to make sure that you have a good understanding of what was being asked to you. The other thing that you were mentioning was, of course, communication is key. Making sure you understand your work itself. Know your employees as a new manager. Get to know your employees. Get to know their strengths. Get to know their competencies. Know how you can utilize different strengths in different ways. Make the team a better team. Make sure you hold your team to account, but make sure that you know how to stand up for your team, which is so important because a lot of managers do not do that. And integrity is a big thing that you mentioned. Yeah.
Integrity. Your personal principles are going to govern how you are, your human being, and your integrity, your honesty, what you value. Will always come through. And so yes, it always comes back to that. If it's something that's going to compromise my integrity, my name, just being honest, then I have a problem with that.
Yeah. Well, Marcia, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you came on this call. I'm so honored that you agreed. This was a great talk. It was a great talk. I know that there's a lot that people would could look at what you said. And if they could take it with them in corporate life, outside of corporate life too, because when you're thinking by employees sometimes, and you need that kind of feedback. How could somebody reach you if they look at this and they say, I want this person as a mentor? How could they get onto you?
Okay. What can I say? I've got phone numbers. I've got email addresses.
Are you like on Facebook, Instagram?
Funny enough, not really. I'm on Facebook, but I rarely have the time to even ever go on it. But if that's the case, I'm definitely on Facebook, and I will go on it more often.
Than so it's just a name, Marcia Parker Robinson.
Yeah, you'll find me on Facebook. Yeah. I will check my PMs. I haven't done that.
Thank you so much, Marcia.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Come on. I mean,
like, a pleasure.
I appreciate it. I hope it helps somebody along the way.
I'm sure.
And basically, at the end of the day, good luck to everybody. Everybody. There's only one other thing. I'll leave you with this. We tend to have templates around what we think life should be and what success is measured by. That's not true. Yeah, there is a size and place for everybody, and the measurements of success is not necessarily the measurements that we have ingrained to us by our societies. And I just want people to understand that if you're in corporate and you're succeeding, great. If you're not in corporate and you're succeeding, great. And success is measured by what makes you happy and nothing else.
Mine. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much, Marcia. So we're going to sign off now. Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.
See you later.